Well, let's do a quick review of the ethics code and standards. And in this review, I'm not going to dive deep into a lot of the detail on guidance and compliance. I'm really just going to see what I can do about giving you enough information that you should be able to get 70-80% of the questions right off the top. Let's begin. First, under professionalism. 4 paragraphs here. A, knowledge of the law. The answer here will always be the code and standards. Always be the code and standards unless more strict is the answer. So the answer is never a no-law country or a less strict country. It is either the code and standards or more strict. Independence and objectivity. Member candidate must not offer, solicit, or accept any gift, benefit, or compensation that could reasonably compromise independence and objectivity. And this is the word here, reasonably. So you may be presented with a couple of scenarios. One is a gift of something around $50. Another is a gift of $500. One would not be a violation. The other would be a violation because $50 would not reasonably compromise your independence and objectivity, whereas $500 might reasonably compromise your independence and objectivity. Misrepresentation in terms of your practice, your credentials, your qualifications, your performance record, or the intended use of third-party managers. You must not misrepresent. And finally, misconduct. No act that reflects poorly on the professional reputation, integrity, or competence of the member candidate. So here we're looking at things like dishonesty, fraud, deceit. Next standard, integrity of capital markets. We have 2 paragraphs here. A, material non-public information. You cannot act or cause others to act on it. And for material non-public information, there is a test whether or not it is material information. The likely effect on price and the source. The more ambiguous the effect is on the price of the security, the less likely it's material. And the source, the less reliable the source, the less likely. So when presented with a scenario, assess those 2 things. If the price effect in the scenario is being hinted at as being ambiguous, it could go up, it could go down, you're not really sure, it's less likely that you have material information. If you heard it from someone who heard it from someone who heard it from someone inside, well, that's a less reliable source, so it's less likely. Note in an analyst report, using mosaic theory is not a violation and can be shared with clients only before being made public. That is not a violation of material non-public information because you didn't use material non-public information. You sort of pieced it together from information. And even if you share it with your clients only before public dissemination, still not a problem. Market manipulation can be information-based or transaction-based. Information-based meaning you're putting out false rumors. Transaction-based means you're engaging in some the impression of something going on. These are the big ones here. You're attempting to distort prices or inflate volume. The intent is to mislead market participants. Now, you may engage in a transaction that actually distorts prices and inflates volume, but it wasn't your intent to mislead market participants. You might have placed an at-the-market order for 100,000 shares and really moved the price and inflated the volume. But your intent wasn't to mislead, so that wouldn't be called market manipulation. It'd be called stupid, but it wouldn't be called market manipulation. Next, we have duties to clients. First one, loyalty, prudence, and care. You must act with reasonable care, prudent judgment, and maintain confidentiality. If custody of assets is involved, you have a heightened level of responsibility. So we're looking at the order of priority. The client is always first. Then it would be the employer, your duties to client, duties to employer, and then yourself. And I sort of just bracket it here. And I put market integrity in front of all of it. I think market integrity is on par with the client, but there's, interpretation as to what this is. If we look at the standards itself, the first one is professionalism. The next one is integrity of capital markets, followed by duties to clients, followed by duty to employers. So it would almost seem to think that they're suggesting that, well, capital markets have a priority over the client, which has a priority over the employer, and then finally the member candidate. I don't think you can go wrong with that. The client is whoever the beneficiary is, and here there's always a suitability test for the beneficiary in terms of anything that we're doing for them. Sometimes there is no clear beneficiary. You might be running an index fund, then the client is the mandate, whatever mandate is that you're managing to. B, fair dealing. Fair does not equal equal. Fair means equitable. and fair dealing in terms of investment analysis, investment recommendations, and investment action at the same level of service. It is okay to have differing levels of service where you get different types of analysis, recommendations, and action here than you do here. But within this category here, everybody must be treated fairly. It is okay to have different levels of service or fees. Next one is suitability, and this is suitability in the context of the whole portfolio. A security on its own may not be suitable for a client, but when considered in the context of the entire portfolio, may be suitable at the portfolio level. KYC, KYM, know your client, know your mandate. Again, you may not have a client, you may be running an index fund, which means you're running it to an index. Know your mandate. Where do you find this information? In the IPS? There is listed the risk and return objectives and requirements and the constraints. D is performance presentation. Must be fair, accurate, and complete. Big one here. You cannot guarantee performance of anything. E, preservation of confidentiality. Unless, so when we say preservation of confidentiality, it means don't say anything ever about any client at all unless illegal activity on the part of the client, unless it is required by law or the client permits it. Next, we have duties to employer, and I mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating again and again. We started with professionalism, and then we went to integrity of capital markets, and we went to duties to clients, now duties to employers. So if we're thinking that there's some information in terms of the priority of the standards that we get to, that the first one is the most important, etc., we have capital markets over here, we have clients over here, and we have employers over there. A, loyalty. Member candidate must act for the benefit of the employer, cannot compete with the employer unless you have permission. If you're leaving to compete, which by the way you can leave to compete, but you cannot take trade secrets or confidential information. You cannot solicit clients while still at your employer before you leave. You cannot solicit clients or take customer lists. And you can't take work that was codified. Clearly, any experience you have in your head about a particular industry, that's yours. You get to walk out the door with that. But if you created some spreadsheet models for that industry, can't touch that. As far as soliciting clients, it is okay after you leave. It's okay to solicit clients as long as the names do not come from a list and there is no agreement in place restricting that. Typically, when you leave a firm, there'll be a period of 6 months where you're not allowed to solicit any past clients. If they come to you, that's okay, but you cannot reach out to them. Typically, there's that agreement in place. If there is no agreement in place, the very day you leave, you can solicit those clients as long as you're not using some customer list that you took from the previous employer. Additional compensation. And when we talk about additional compensation, it is not from the employer to the member candidate. It is from clients to the member candidate. So if the employer gives the employee a fee for doing something, that is not additional compensation. That is compensation. Additional compensation comes from outside the firm. It is from clients to the member candidate. Any compensation that might reasonably create a conflict of interest should be disclosed. It's not saying that you cannot take additional compensation, but you must disclose that additional compensation. Any compensation that might reasonably create a conflict of interest. Again, there's that word. So you may get to a scenario where there was additional compensation of something very small or something very large, and you have to make a judgment call as, could that reasonably affect my independence? independence and objectivity? Could it create a conflict of interest? Is a $20 lunch really going to make me think differently about things? And finally, duties to employers. We have responsibilities of supervisors. A reasonable effort to detect or prevent violations of laws, rules and regulations, or the code and standards. And this reasonable effort to detect or prevent violations extends to anyone subject to supervision, whether they're a member candidate or not. So if we have a supervisor and they have people below them, and let's say there's only one who's a member candidate and the rest are not, it doesn't matter. It still applies to all of them as far as the supervisor is concerned. Delegation, no relief. So if the supervisor delegates to this person to monitor this group for detection and prevention of these things, it still does not absolve the supervisor if the member candidate fails to act. Investment analysis, recommendations, and action. A, diligence and reasonable basis. You must exercise diligence, independence, and thoroughness, and you must have a reasonable and adequate basis for recommending an investment, supported by fact. B, communication with clients, disclose investment process. This is just the general principles. You don't have to disclose everything. Disclose the investment process in terms of its general principles and any changes to it or people involved. Perhaps there is a key person, we'll just write key person, that makes a lot of the investment decisions, and people are attracted to this particular fund because of this key person, and maybe this key person isn't making any of the investment decisions anymore or has been moved out. Well, that has to be disclosed. And in communicating with clients, you must distinguish between fact and opinion. Last one, under this standard, record retention. Records can be kept in either hard copy form or electronic. They are the property of the firm. Must maintain appropriate records to support any investment analysis, any investment recommendation, investment actions, or communication with clients. And you can't take copies without consent. Next standard is conflict of interest. First one, full disclosure. Full disclosure of all matters that could reasonably be expected to impair independence and objectivity. And this is full disclosure to the client and to the employer. To the client, especially for fee arrangements, where you're recommending a product or a service, but you're getting a particularly high fee for doing that. Would the client like to know that? Would the client expect that that may reasonably be expected to impair your independence and objectivity? Yes. If somebody who's recommending a particular product to me is getting a kickback for that, well, is it good for me or is it good for them? Exactly why are you recommending this product? And full disclosure to employers. This is things like additional compensation. Remember, additional compensation is from clients to the employee, not from the employer. Also things like extra activities that the member or candidate may be involved in outside of the organization, where there is some activity that could reasonably be expected to impair their independence and objectivity or give the impression of a conflict of interest. Well, then disclose it, right? Full disclosure. Next, priority of transactions. Clients first, employer second, member candidate last. The member candidate is free to invest personally. There is no rule against that. But clients cannot be disadvantaged by it. If there are family accounts, if the member candidate has members of their family that have accounts of the firm, family accounts that are client accounts are treated as client accounts. Last one in the standard, referral fees. The member candidate must disclose to employers and clients any compensation, consideration, benefit received from or paid to others for the recommendation of products or services. Last one, responsibility as a CFA member candidate. A, conduct as a member candidate in the program must not engage in any conduct that compromises the integrity of CFAI or the CFA designation or the integrity of the exams. Like discussing specific questions, broad topical areas. So, for example, level 2, level 3 have ranges over which questions can range. So, a section might be 10 to 20%. Well, you can't really discuss those areas saying, well, there were 3 on equity in my particular exam, or any formulas tested or not tested. In other words, you get out of the exam, you're free to say it was harder, it was easier, you liked it, or you didn't like it, but you can't get into detail about any of it. B, reference to CFAI, that's the CFA Institute, CFA designation, or CFA program. You must not imply partial designation, calling yourself a level 1 CFA or CFA level 1, and you must not cite a completion date. All right, now that we've been through all of that, let's look at some common points of confusion. Our first one is regular compensation versus additional compensation. How do you identify something that's additional compensation? And it's who pays. If the employer is paying the member or candidate, that is regular compensation. If the client is paying the member or candidate, that is additional compensation. And with additional compensation, we have to ask the question, is there a potential conflict of interest here when the client is paying the member candidate? And help us answer that, we can ask, is the additional compensation being offered before the fact? In other words, before performance, or is it being offered after performance? If it's being offered before performance, then yes, there is a clear potential conflict of interest here, because the member or candidate may be acting in the best interest of this particular client at the expense of other clients, so there may be a potential conflict of interest. To accept this additional compensation from the client, the member or candidate must get permission in writing from the organization that they work for, from their employer. If it is after the fact, let's say that during the course of the year you delivered a good return to somebody and somebody offers you a gift. Well, that's still considered additional compensation, but it's after the fact. So is there a potential conflict of interest here? Well, no, because you've already done the performance. It could not affect your judgment in terms of dealing with other clients because you didn't know that it was going to happen. You've already delivered the performance. Got the gift. So here you have notification and disclosure that has to be made. And in today's modern world, everything is pretty much done by email. You should follow that strategy. So you don't have to worry about should it be in writing or should it not be. Just email. That's enough to be in writing. But you do have to notify management and disclose the fact that you did get this. It is after the fact, so you can't really seek permission for it because it might have been given to you after performance, and while it's too late to ask for permission, you just send notification and disclose it to the employer. Let's go back to regular compensation. There is something called a client migration bonus. So let's say that you work for firm A and you are moving over to firm B. And there's the date at which you will move over to firm B. You know that you can't solicit clients from firm A until you leave that firm, until a certain date where, okay, I'm no longer with that firm. Now I can solicit previous clients as long as I don't use any customer lists I took from A. Company B might be offering you a bonus of, let's say, $200 for each client you bring over. And then that becomes the question of, well, does that have to be disclosed to the clients? Well, since it's the employer paying the member or candidate, it is not additional compensation, and it's not a referral fee, which we'll get to down here. It is just regular compensation. But there is a question that has to be asked. Can that sum of money being offered per client reasonably impair the member or candidate's independence and objectivity. So if you're moving from company A to company B, and company B is saying there's a $200 or a $300 a bonus for every client that you bring over, a small amount of money like that isn't going to impair. We can make the assessment that that's a reasonable person wouldn't, their independence and objectivity wouldn't be impaired by that. But as that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then yes, it could. So you might have a situation where you're given a scenario like this, and the signing bonus or the amount that you would receive from your employer is small enough, like $200, $300, $400, even $500 per client. And then there might be another one where it's significant, where we'll give you $150,000 as a signing bonus, depending on the number of clients that you bring over, so that it's really significant, such that your motivation is to bring clients over because of the money, not because you think you can do a good job for your clients. Now, this becomes even more significant when the investment process at B is significantly different than the investment process at A. And significantly different, almost to the point where it may be borderline unsuitable for the clients that you had with firm A. Then yeah, clearly this is reasonably impairing your independence and objectivity. So if you get to the conclusion that, well, the money's small enough, it wouldn't reasonably impair my independence and objectivity, there is no disclosure necessary because it is regular compensation. You don't have to disclose your regular compensation. If it can reasonably be expected to impair independence and objectivity, you do have to disclose it to your clients. All right, that takes care of regular compensation versus additional compensation. This is another one that causes grief, the difference between fee sharing and referral fees. And then I've got another category here called the referral fee / fee sharing. Fee sharing, no disclosures required. Fee sharing works like this. I say to a client, our management fee is 1.5% of assets under management. And that's what everybody pays, by the way, 1.5%. And the client agrees at 1.5, and then from that 1.5, I may decide that I'm going to share that 1.5 with some people in the organization. That's perfectly fine. The client is aware that their fee is 1.5%. How I share that 1.5% means nothing to them. It's not important to them how I share it. Much like a real estate agent, we know that you're going to charge 5 or 6% commission on the value of the house. How they decide to share that 5 or 6% among their team makes no difference to us. A referral fee, on the other hand, does matter. We do have to disclose to our employer, the client, and prospective clients before entry to any agreement whether this referral fee is given to someone else or received, plus the nature of the referral fee, whether it be a flat fee, a percentage, a one-time fee, or a continuing fee. When we get to continuing, that's where we cross the boundary between referral fee and fee sharing. It may look like fee sharing, but it's still a referral fee. So let me give you an example of a referral fee. I say to my accountant, hey, listen, you got a lot of people coming through, probably looking for investments. Why don't you send them my way, and I'll give you $200 or $300 for every client you send my way. So you think, well, that's a good idea. So you start sending clients my way because you like that $200 or $300. You may not be sending them to me because you think that they're the best fit, that I'm the best person to manage their money. It's for the referral fee. The accountant obviously has their own code and standards and their own body of ethics, codified ethics. They probably would have to disclose that as well. I would have to disclose that as well. So that the prospective client, since it is a referral fees require disclosure, period, end of story, no conversation about it. For any prospective client coming, oh, you're coming from so-and-so, this is the arrangement we have. I would have to disclose that referral fee. Whether it's a flat fee like $200 or $300, or whether I give them a percentage of the assets under management. Let's say I say, well, look, I'll give you 0.2% of all the money that you send my way. So if you send a client over and they've got $2 million, I'll give you 0.2% of that $2 million. That's disclosing whether it's one time, whether it's continuing, anything that's a referral fee. So I'm paying somebody else to send somebody over. Perhaps there's a fund out there that says, hey, listen, any of your clients you put in my fund, I'll kick back some of the fee. Well, now I, as the investment manager, am not paying a referral fee to get assets under management. I'm getting paid to give assets under management to a particular fund manager. I would have to disclose that. Any referral fee must be disclosed. Now, sometimes we have a referral fee that looks like fee sharing. So let's go back to the fee sharing where I say there's no disclosure. I say to my accountant, you know what, I charge all my clients 1.5%. So from the client's perspective, there's no difference. They all pay 1.5%. Now I said over here, who cares how I share my fee? There's no disclosure, and that's true. But if it's based on a referral, if I'm fee sharing in substitution of a referral fee, this is where we get the continuing payment going on. That is still a referral fee, even though it looks like it's fee sharing. It's still a referral fee. The accountant may be motivated by that referral fee, and the client may be coming to me based on the trust they have with their accountant to come to me. I would have to disclose as well, look, this is the arrangement I have with your accountant. It is still a referral fee.